Well, hello there. It's been a while. More than a couple of years ago, even before COVID time, I used to do a podcast sort of thing with other creative people where we talked for 1 or 2 hours about our craft. The idea was that I've gotten enjoyment out of talking shop with other creators, discussing what makes them tick. So I figured why not record a few of our conversations for the enjoyment of whoever wants to listen along. Nothing special, something you might listen to while you draw or something, maybe drive, walk. I never felt much incentive to include a video portion for that reason, but who knows, maybe someday you guys can let me know in the comments below. Before this episode starts, though, I'll open with a word of apologies. I've done numerous times in the past, as the audio levels of this conversation might be a bit wonky, at least on my end. Fortunately, my guest is an expert sound guy, among other things, so you should be able to hear him just fine. I, on the other hand, will likely continue to make a mess with my audio levels until my dying day. Hopefully, the quality of the conversation will make up for any technical glitches. So let's let our guest introduce himself, and I'll speak with you again at the end.
Good morning. My name is Brad Torgersen. I'm a science fiction novelist and short fiction writer. I've been doing it for about 15 years, although I've been working at the craft much, much longer than that. I'm also a full-time Chief Warrant Officer, U.S. Army Reserve, on full-time orders right now, have been for a few years. Um, Born and raised in the Mountain West of the United States. Still live here on a home, married for 32 years. And yeah, I'm trepidatious about this brave new world of AI, or at least the so-called AI that we are embarking upon.
Mm. I guess to breach the topic, but there's a million things we could talk about.
Sure.
We were saying off air just a second ago, off air, that everyone and their dog has a podcast now, and you were involved in highly professional recording and broadcasting back in the day.
Right. So my genesis in the recording realm started back in '92 with KRCL FM in Salt Lake City. Eventually, I was student program director at KSVR FM in Washington State, and then drifted over to KSER FM, and then back in Salt Lake, ended up back at KRCL. All of this was public radio, mind you, but there were still standards of professionalism required. There was a pretty thorough training program I had to go through before I was actually on air at KRCL in the beginning. And so you got used to the old world of radio. It was a bit like, I don't know if anybody remembers WKRP in Cincinnati back in '78. Wasn't too different from that in the early '90s. We still had Tascam reel-to-reels and cart machines, the old 8-track style cart machines. We did have CD players. We did have vinyl, of course, cassette. But yeah, you had the Tascams. The potentiometer board was this ancient knob analog thing. We had a sound engineer who was constantly chasing hums and buzzes through it.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was really kind of fun to still be part of that when it still existed. Um, I did when I moved back to Utah get back involved with KRCL again, and yeah, a lot of change. Not only their building had changed, but this whole way you even did music on the radio had changed because things were going to MP3, and instead of chasing through a library of vinyl and CDs and cassettes, now everything was just on a computer. And so you would queue up all your music through basically a digital audio workstation. You still had boom mics and you were on air and had to do station identification. Um, and yeah, you had to kind of maintain a sort of professional a presence, I guess is the best word. You had to have a presence.
Yeah.
And it definitely took some practice. Uh, I credit doing the radio in the early days with kind of helping me not be nervous in front of crowds. So once I started publishing and I started going to conventions, some of these crowds got pretty big on some of these panels I was on. Not because of me, it was usually because I was with Brandon Sanderson or some superstar. But those were pretty big rooms. But it wasn't too hard to just kind of drop into mic mode and just start going. like it was the old radio days. Now, the first few times I was on air, I remember being very, very nervous. And yeah, you had to get into the flow of talking and avoiding all the little things that we stick into our normal, real conversation, the ums and the ers and the pauses and all that stuff. Um,
Hmm.
it's weird to think about it because it's been over 30 years. Yeah, 92 is when I first dipped my toe in, and then I was on the air by 93, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great deal of fun. But now everybody has a podcast, and it's like everybody and their dog has a little home studio where they've set up a digital mic, and everyone's doing some pretty impressively professional stuff where they have backgrounds and everybody is getting used to being on the mic and doing interviews and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of crazy. My wife and I have actually talked about maybe sometime maybe doing a podcast. That's where I met her, actually, was doing the radio. I should mention that.
Hmm.
We met at the same time, KRCL days back in the early 90s. We've been married ever since then, so our roots as a couple go into radio. She's got a great voice. It's amazing. She's got a great face for TV too, but radio is where we met. She's got a beautiful radio voice. I get by. Mine's okay.
I
Um,
I would say you've certainly retained that professional sounding voice way more than mine,
Thank
anyway.
you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, I clear my throat and cough and fart on podcasts all the time, but the way I would justify it, I suppose, speaking
Well,
as
the
an
beauty of
amateur,
editing, yeah, the beauty of editing. Live was live was very intimidating
yeah,
because you'd flip that switch and see the needle start to wobble, and you're like, oh my gosh, the
mm,
whole city's gonna hear me. Whoever's listening early in the morning back then, it was way early.
mm,
But still, it was very intimidating to think this is live. Anything I say or do is going to go out live. Of course, we had the um, expectations put on us about you know things you can't say on the air, right?
yeah,
The seven dirty words, George Carlin's famous dirty words. So there was all these expectations of how you were supposed to comport yourself and how you were supposed to talk and all these things, and
hmm,
it was just a whole different world. Yeah, and now everyone's doing it seemingly. Um,
with
it's
varying
amazing.
levels of professionalism, I suppose.
Yes, correct. Yeah, everybody's got their own. It takes everyone a little while to ramp up, and then some people just get super duper pro about it. It's amazing to see what happens. Plus, the people have the GoPro cameras, right? They're out there recording themselves in the world on YouTube. I'm subscribed to a few channels where it's just guys fishing, right? I love to fish. So, but in the summer when it gets hot, I'm usually not out there, but it's still fun to tune into some of these guys that hike up in the mountains and do fly fishing way up high and all this stuff. And
Hmm.
it's just it's just a different world. It really, really is. Makes me feel old.
Well, I like to use the word interesting. So whenever someone wants to make quote content,
Right.
I'll tune
Yeah.
in if the things they're talking about are interesting or if the people are
Sure.
interesting. I
Yeah.
personally never
Yeah.
cared if it's polished.
Sure.
I like sincerity and openness.
I agree. Yeah, I concur.
So it's
Yeah.
really, I mean, we'll eventually get to the AI, I think, at some point, because I find that topic endlessly fascinating. I guess maybe I'm getting off the track a little bit, but I would want to challenge us as creators. What is the pros and cons of more and more people putting out content? Are there pros and cons, or is it just a different landscape to navigate?
Oh, the one that I think about most often is there's this idea of audience capture. I think this is across all of the different internet mediums, podcasts, articles, Twitter, Facebook, doesn't matter what it is, especially when people are monetized. I think, of course, like with YouTube, I call it the cute girl does anything syndrome, right? Like some guy he's great on the bass, and he sits down and he does this little video where he's playing bass on some, he's doing a cover on some classic rock tune, and he gets a few thousand hits, and few hundred comments tops, right? And then attractive young woman sits down, may or may not be in various stages of clothing, does exactly the same thing, millions of views and thousands of comments, and it's just obvious what gets people's attention. And so when a creator puts their stuff into the world on the new digital landscape, and they get that instant feedback. It's like within moments, clicks, likes, shares, and you can tell after a few days, like, oh, okay, what did I put out this week or this month got people's attention? And the stuff that gets people's attention and gets the most clicks and likes and shares and blah 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 is what the person will naturally gravitate toward doing more and more and more. And then it gets, I don't know, it gets it's to me it's disappointing if that person suddenly just becomes a monotonous, that's all they do,
Mm.
right? It's just the same thing over and over. Now, getting back to my comment about fishing channels, yes, certain channels, it's going to be constrained to a singular thing. I'm not saying doing a tight subgenre of content is bad. That's not what I'm saying, but I do think people tend to get captured by what they think is the most popular, especially if they're monetized. I I have a lot of mixed feelings about monetization because I think, well, on the one hand, it's a way for creative people to, be compensated for the effort they're making on whatever it is that they're making. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do think sometimes with people, especially if they have very eclectic interests or they can range through a bunch of different topics or a bunch of different again subgenres, they'll start just tightening it in on just the few things that seem to get the most traction. I see this on Twitter constantly. I mean, Twitter is such a madhouse. Um, where it's obvious that once people start to get traction, they figure out very quickly what it is they're getting traction for, and then they just become this bullhorn of nothing but that. And that gets kind of old, especially if it's politics.
Slog.
I'm a sinner like everyone else. I use Twitter to voice my opinions, but I hope that's not all I do. In fact, this summer I've been trying to really rein myself back and strictly use Twitter and Facebook to just do some self promotion, which I'm actually really bad at, uh, and I need to be better about, as opposed to just endlessly being cranky about whatever's the political topic of the day, like everyone else. And um, yeah, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, certainly everyone's fighting for attention, and the way I see it is on Twitter I play the Undertaker, like on WWF or whatever. Like there is this character named G Prime who just screams about everything and he hates everything, and that certainly is a part of my personality. But then
Sure.
I think there's the actual in-person version of myself who makes sweet children's books sometimes, but also draws violent comics with cowboys killing each other and all kinds of things. And that's the stuff that I really care about,
Right.
that I
Sure.
want to give people as a gift, like as an artist or illustrator, whatever, part-time writer. I want to give people pleasure with,
Sure.
oh, here's a fun story that I made up, and do you want to read it? Have some fun. Oh, maybe throw me a few bucks to thank me, and I'll thank you
Right.
for your custom, and
Sure.
let's do that
Sure.
again. But on X, to even get those people to hear about the book, I have to play the Undertaker, which in a way gives them enjoyment, I suppose.
Sure.
But that's
Sure.
such a small part of who I am. But we have
Right.
to play these caricatures, I assume. At least
Of
that's what's
course.
worked for me.
No, I get it. I totally get it. Like, I became aware of you through your political comics, of course. I think that's how most people come to you is through the political comics.
Yeah.
I was struck really, there were two things that struck me. Oh, my cat is here. Great. Or actually, technically, it's my daughter's cat. She kind of left her here when she moved out.
Hmm.
Um,
I have to close my
so if you hear
door. Peace of
meowing,
mind.
if you hear meowing, that's what that is.
Cats are
Anyway,
welcome.
the political comics were a beautiful blend of style. It was a very different, very engaging style with what I considered to be incredibly biting satire, which I really enjoyed. I really relished it. Back when I was a young man, I got into a strip that doesn't really exist in the papers anymore called Bloom County. Burt Breathes was the writer and artist on that, and he had the same thing. He had a very specific style, very biting satire. You know, he was great about nailing, the current thing, the current issues, but he was also topical. He could range all over and do different stuff. So the more I paid attention to you, the more I admired your skill with that, especially because way back in the day, when I actually bothered with pencils and was trying to, get better at it when I was a teenager and whatnot, I have always admired competent visual artists who are very good at a specific individual style that is just engaging. You can metabolize it really easily. You can tell this person's got talent. So I was like, ooh, this guy is really good. And the more I saw of your stuff, I was like, this guy is really, really good. This is really cool. And then, of course, you and I started interacting, and that was very enjoyable. But I totally get you about wanting to let people know that, man, I do other stuff. I totally get that. And the Goofberry, especially the stuff you're doing now, I'm loving the panels that you've been putting out for the new Goofberry because it's a human side of you that people who are either just used to the political commentary or, I'm going to say it, get angry at you for the political commentary. It's like, oh, guess what? George is a human being too. And he has other things he wants to do, like he wants to do another kid's book or the project you did with Razor Fist. It's like, I'm going to do a Western. I'm going to do like a full Western graphic novel. Now, I got a question on that. Were you co-author or were you strictly illustrator and inker?
I was
What was your
just
role on that?
what do you call it with the guy that's uh, on a ship? I'm just the guy moving the boxes around. It's his
Oh,
story
okay.
completely. I just
Okay, okay,
illustrated the panels.
okay. And it sounded like that was a logistical nightmare trying to get that shipped.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how
Well,
many I don't know how many thousands of copies you guys shipped, but
I
it
think
sounded like it was a lot of heavy lifting.
over 7,000 books. It wouldn't have been
Oh
so.
man.
It wouldn't have been too bad, except I didn't have the facility for actually. What's the word? Logistics, whatever. But like, my wife helped immensely. She's got a really good brain for organization, numbers, all that stuff.
Nice.
So we had to convert our house into a warehouse for a few months, and it was brutal, and it was my
Sure.
fault.
Oh yeah.
We got all these books coming in. We had to get a storage place. I hope
Sure.
no one's bored by this story. We got a storage place. I had to go back and forth. The delivery guy delivered like 3 pallets of books, and there were all these problems. Like it didn't fit through the door, so I had to have him leave them in the hallway, and then I spent a
Right, right.
day. Anyway, so the logistics sucked, but that's part of the
Yeah,
fun
I
of
don't doubt it.
self-publishing too.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. I'm from the old universe again. Most of my stuff's been traditionally published. Now, when I say that, for people who don't know the lingo, so there's this phrase called trad pub, which just means you've gone the traditional route. You've gone through an editor at a publishing house. Typically, these are located in New York, although not always. And your stuff passes through the bowels of this editorial process before it reaches print, and you got to do what are called galleys and blah blah blah, and eventually you have a book that shows up at a Barnes and Noble or at a possibly an independent seller. Unfortunately, I came in after the little mall shops like Walden Books and B. Dalton were pretty much done. I grew up with the mall shops and independent bookstores. Barnes and Noble, I don't think existed in the '80s. It may have, but it wasn't in my neck of the woods. But I still have my roots in that world, and that's where most of my work is done. But most of the people that I know that are making money are doing it indie now, which means they're doing it through Amazon. They're independently publishing. They are even getting hardbacks independent through different presses. I played around with that a little bit just to see what was possible. It's amazing what people can do. They can pretty much do the whole thing start to finish without having to do a traditional house at all. But then, of course, it comes down to marketing and storage. Like you said, you got to house your books, you got to keep the stock on hand, you got to ship the stock, you got to haul it around to events or bookstores or wherever you're going to try to sell this stuff.
Yeah. The
And it's a
hardest
real
part,
bear.
I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say the hardest part is getting people to know that the book exists, and that's
Yeah,
probably
sure.
been a problem since publishing became
Yeah,
popularized. Even back
yeah.
in the day, comic books used to be on newsstands, grocery
Yep.
stores, pharmacies, whatever, along with any kind of fiction, books. And then, of course, back in the day, I would go to like the pharmacy and see Harlequin books all over the place, and I assumed that was because they guessed, oh, there's women shoppers, maybe they'll pick up a $5 romance book or something like that.
Right, right.
And then way back, I don't know when it started, but maybe late 90s, newspapers just started dropping comic strips. There was this whole old model called the syndication or
Hmm,
syndicates.
hmm. Yep.
Oh, so you know about it. But
Hmm.
for anyone who doesn't, I guess it was you take like a Charlie Brown or something. You would have to go through a syndicate, and then they would distribute your strip to every newspaper in the country. But then, since newspapers became replaced by things like X and Instagram and so on, social media, now we are our own agents and salespeople and the artist, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. Because
But
you're the everything man, right?
and I don't have a business mind at all. I hate it. But I have found that you have to wear all these hats. There are
Yeah,
people
sure,
that came before me, certainly.
sure.
But in the indie world, let's say, it's not different from trad pub, as you said, but it's just that you're doing more jobs, and the job that scares me the most is editing.
Mm,
When I
right,
read my
sure,
own stuff, I especially we were talking about prose a little bit. I can't. I know there's something wrong with my prose, but I can't figure out what it is. So I actually have to hire friends who are bookworms to just read my stuff and tell me, look, is this flowing wrong? What's wrong here?
sure, sure, sure.
So that's one way to handle it. And of course, I don't know. I know a lot of creators, indie creators, who are proud and think that they're perfect and they don't need editorial.
Yeah, there's some egos. Yeah, there's some egos. I've had a lot of different editors in the traditional world. Some I've worked with. It's been very hands off. My editor at Analog Magazine, when he was still there, Stan Schmidt, he changed very little about my stories that I sent him. And then I had another editor at Orson Scott Card's online magazine when it was still running, and Ed Schubert, good guy, but man, he was almost like a co-writer by the end of the editor process. It was different from person to person. Now, I had always been kind of taught to be, work with your editor no matter who it is. Don't be too picky about changes they want to make, and don't be too emotionally wrapped up in the story that you're like, no, we can't change anything. It's going to stay exactly the way it is. And yeah, I hate to say it, a lot of people do have egos where they're just insistent that no, it is perfect the way I've made it. I will not change a thing. Um,
There have been books where I'll read a series where I assume an editor changed from, let's say, book one to book five.
oh yeah,
And
right.
book
Hmm,
one is
yeah.
so good. And then book five is garbage. And I think what happens is the author thinks
Yeah.
that they're like, I'll use a film example actually. M. Night Shyamalan's early movies are excellent.
Oh yeah, right.
And then
Sure.
he left the company he was working with after The Village. And then he became like the sole author, director, everything. And I
Hmm.
think he needed a lot of creators need that extra voice on their shoulder to say like, hey, you're going too far with this, or you need to
Sure.
trim this.
Sure. Sure.
And so it's a balance, but
Yeah.
we both know it hurts when someone tells you like you got to cut this whole paragraph or this whole chapter out.
Right.
Hopefully they're doing
Yeah.
it not to flex on you, but to make the project better.
Well, that's where you got to hope you have an editor who at least somewhat sees things the way you do,
Yeah.
or at least kind of can tell the direction you're trying to go with a project and can help you get there. Again, I've had many different editors, and everybody has their own style. Some I've worked with better than others. I try to my my personal policy is to try to be pretty flexible and not be so invested that I can't go, well, maybe that does sound better, and then change some things. And yeah, for me, it has paid to be easy to work with, just because I had always heard that, yeah, in fact, the story I would tell is the story that Eric Flint, before he died, used to like to tell at convention panels. He called it the Robert Urich story, where Robert Urich supposedly wasn't the best actor in the world. I don't know if you remember him from Spencer for Hire or any of the B movies he did.
It's,
But he would show up. He was sober. He knew his lines. He was easy to work with. He was a nice guy, so he always got work. He always got parts. They always figured out, hey, let's get Robert Urich. He'll be fine for this because we know he's going to be no drama. It's going to be easy, as opposed to somebody who has a reputation for being like probably one of the most notorious people in science fiction that I can think of is Harlan Ellison. Harlan Ellison, very famous name in science fiction.
I've been
But he
studying him
in
recently.
okay. Harlan had a ferocious reputation
Yeah.
across the board. He was known for being an ass to work with in many, many instances. Terrific imagination, brilliant as far as the prose was concerned, but definitely had an ego, massive ego, was a total pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I will out myself. The one way that I'm a pain in the butt is I'm terrible with deadlines. My poor editors have suffered with me soaring past deadlines way too many times. In fact, I'm late on one particular thing right now I need to work on this week. But uh, even that, if you can be the kind of person that makes your deadlines, you're easy to work with. When the editor wants to make changes, you say, "Yep, that sounds good." That gets you invited back. You get invited back for more books and more anthologies. And if you're a pain in the butt, like one author I was witness to just being a beast with an editor on an anthology. Oh my goodness, he went out of his way to be a pill on that one, and I never understood why. But obviously, he was never invited back either. So,
Yeah, the temperament of a artist,
oh yeah, right.
speaking as someone who does whatever illustration, it's like there is that diva inside that
Yes,
is like,
yes,
no, I
sure,
want to be a genius, but also I suck, but also don't criticize me, but also love my stuff.
sure.
I've seen, yeah, it's a temperament thing, and I'm actually curious how that would relate, if it relates, in your opinion, to your background in the military. When a guy, I actually know a guy who's, I guess I shouldn't say too much. Let me let me go back for a second. If you're going through basic, whatever, you're a young person, their whole
Hmm.
point
Hmm.
is to get rid of all of your pride, to break you down, make you humble so that you can learn, and then they rebuild you, that kind of thing. So what you're describing is a sort of resilience when someone criticizes your work and you're saying, oh yeah, whatever, I'll just roll with it. Would you attribute that to your background, your
Uh,
personality?
I, I, I think it's a combo of both. There's no question that initial entry training, aka basic training, that is its job. It is to take you and take your ego and smash it against the wall, and you pick the pieces back up, and what you pick up off the floor is kind of the new you. Now, it doesn't replace your existing who you are. Like it doesn't supplant who you are, but now you have this overlapping. How do I describe it? Not a persona per se, but it's kind of like an identity, I guess. I hate to use that word because that gets thrown around in politics all the time now, but it really is an identity. So you arrive at IET, aka basic training, with your existing identity, and then the military stomps that into the dirt over and over and over, and you leave IET with this new identity that overlaps with your old identity, and that's your military identity. And I was dumb enough. I went back through it twice. I went through basic training, and then a few years later, when I was what was called a non-commissioned officer, aka a sergeant, I had a mentor, and she said, "I'm retiring. It's time for you to go to warrant officer candidate school." I said, "Right." So I went off to warrant officer candidate school. It was like basic training all over again, but harder. They stomp your face back into the mud. You adopt this additional identity on top of your military identity. In my case, it was shaping you into this new role in the military that's different from your old role. And yeah, by the time I got to publishing, my ego had been sufficiently kicked where it hurts. I wasn't game to be a pill with any of my editors, never. Now I will say this too, having been married from the time I was 19, like my wife is, she's a dragon lady, and she never had any qualms about calling me out on any of my bullshit ever, and still doesn't. So there was that as well.
Hmm.
If you have a spouse who is a full 100% partner in whatever it is you're doing, and they know you and they know your ins and outs and they know your good points and they know your bad points and they're not afraid to call you on your bad points, that's gonna cool your jets as well. And I sometimes run into writer people who it's obvious they don't have that. And then the ones that do, it's really obvious. I obviously prefer the latter, and I try to be the latter. I don't want to be the prima donna. I don't want to be that person.
Well, I don't see the benefit to being. I mean, you could call it humility versus ego, pride, whatever. To be proud is just unattractive, and it
Sure. Right.
repels people. And I think part of
Yeah.
it comes from the feeling of being small and insignificant in our younger years, or undiscovered, let's say. And then
Sure.
when people finally start reading our stuff, like I actually hate compliments because I have that small person inside me that's like, yeah, I want to be great. Everyone thinks I'm great. Yay. But then you start actually believing it and it's poison. And I've seen
Sure.
so many people, not just in this profession, in every profession, sports, I'm sure in the military, you see these guys that think they're hot stuff, but it's so corrosive to the spirit. And coming from a religious background, I assume you are. I came from a similar background. I just
I assume it's Greek Orthodox, right?
no, I was raised Protestant. Long story
Oh, okay.
short, when my part of the reason my family immigrated here, I think, was because the Greek Orthodox Church was giving them a hard time because
Oh,
they were calling them, what was the word? It's basically like you're non-Christian, you're a fake
oh,
Christian.
damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah,
So were they Greek but not practicing Orthodox? It was something else?
well, it's just what we would call Protestant. They called it evangelical.
Oh, right.
I can tell
Sure.
you the
Hmm.
story, but it's kind of, I don't know if it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm curious.
But
I'm definitely curious,
so
if you don't
that
mind.
side of the family was, they were called Pontic Greeks, which is like originally they were not mainland Greek people,
Hmm.
so they were all over the place. As far as I could trace it back, they ended up in Russia because they had fled the Ottoman Empire like 100 plus years, 100 years ago, something like that. So they were living way out east of Greece, ended up in Russia, then came back to Greece, then left Greece in the 60s, came here.
Wow.
So they were running all over the place, constant poverty, all these, very interesting stories.
Sure.
Well, how did I get to this? Oh, yeah, so they were Protestant. And so when I was born, I was just raised in this evangelical church, which became non denominational, slash. Well, anyway, so that was my upbringing. And to get back
Okay.
to what
Sure.
I originally meant to before the rabbit
Pride.
trail was that
Yeah.
I was raised with this idea of, well, if God illustrates himself as a humble, he is humble, or at least
Hmm.
Jesus did, you know.
Yep.
Therefore we should be humble. So it's like when I get this feeling of, oh, I want to be proud, I've seen so many and heard so many Bible stories of when you're proud, you're going to get chopped down. And then
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
humble yourself, you'll be exalted. There's that whole thing.
Right. Pride
So
goeth before the fall. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he who is first shall be last, and he who is last
Yes.
shall. So I
Yeah.
keep thinking like if I get a compliment, that's actually very dangerous. Like it's kind of radioactive. I understand that people just want to be nice, but then I have that thing in my head that's like, yeah, I want to be great. And I don't think the human creature, animal, I was going to say, is capable of holding that without it destroying them. You can't hold that in your hands because it's going to burn you. Thinking
Yeah.
that you're hot stuff.
It's really tricksy, right? Because especially I think as creative people, and especially once you start getting some notoriety, you have to you have to step back from that and or at least try to, right? Step back from it and say, okay, this is really flattering. I'm really enjoying this. I know once I started picking up some of the awards, I was incredibly flattered because I had labored on this thing for many, many years
Yeah.
with nothing to show for it. Just endless rejection letters. In the old days of trad publishing, you had no choice. You sent your stories and books to the editorial houses and to the editors' desks, and they would send back these little form letters in your self-addressed stamp envelope that said "Thank you, but no thank you."
Yeah.
And I got hundreds of those. So once I finally started publishing, and then started getting like Reader's Choice Award, and I picked up the Dragon Award for my book back in 2019, et cetera, et cetera. This was incredibly gratifying, but I'm like you. I was raised in a religious environment. I'm still practicing religious, although if you ask my wife, I'm not doing it enough.
No.
She's she's so good. She is like mega regular Sunday attendance. She is involved. I'm a lot more flaky than that, but I was raised with the belief that yeah, you can't let it go to your head. It is a sin to let it go to your head. So it's yeah, how do you navigate that if you're a religious believing person, or at least you're in the tradition, the Christian tradition of beware of pride, beware of being full of yourself, beware of being puffed up, especially in the esteem of the world versus the esteem of the Lord, right? The two are exactly opposite of each other. At least I was always taught they're opposite of each other.
Well, there's a million examples biblically, but then we see it in real life too. I've seen so many
Yeah,
creators, my
right.
peers, some older than me, some younger, where
Sure.
they really think like they're the man, and
Right. Sure.
I just see their ego break everything they've built over the years.
Sure. Sure.
And then that also ties into what do they call it? Unearned valor,
Oh, stolen valor
stolen
in the
valor. It's
military?
something like
Yeah,
that.
stolen valor. Yeah,
I could,
stolen valor.
yeah, I would compare it to like if you bought a black belt versus earning a black belt.
Oh yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
like you can tell when a person has really earned it because I think a master, at least my romantic image of what a master is, they don't have to flex and brag. They just know they're a master, and everyone
Sure.
around them
Sure.
knows.
Yeah.
Whereas the
I when I was
braggart,
a
I think, I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're exactly right. I completely agree. I because you mentioned black belts. When I was a teenager, for a couple of years, I was at a dojo with a guy from Okinawa. This guy was legit Japanese karate. I mean, he was not some mall karate guy. He was the real thing, and he was the most humble dude. Like to just see him out walking around on the street, you would have no idea. He was just this little Japanese guy, and you just had no clue. But this guy was for real, and he was exactly that. He was a lot like a lot of military guys I've met who've been some places and done some stuff that's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Like me, I haven't. I'm in the army. I'm what's called a POG, person other than grunt. It is very unglamorous. I am the Radar O'Reilly of warrant officers. Hopefully, your MASH fans know that reference. I'm a paper pusher, but I've met some people who aren't, and yeah, they don't wear it. They don't wear it. They. It's interesting. The more they've done and the more hardcore stuff they've done, the less likely they are to want to brag about it, talk about it. Sometimes you have to kind of pry, and it has to be very situationally specific to get them to talk about it.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works. It really is.
We're really touching on human nature, like at it, almost its core. Like I would one way I could phrase it as like the reptile brain of like. We were even saying if someone clicks on a thumbnail of like the hot chick
Oh, yeah, right.
versus
Yeah. Yep.
you're
Yep.
just engaging their reptile brain, and or
Exactly.
in Dune they would call you an animal or something. Are you a
Right.
human or an
Yeah.
animal?
Sure.
To get someone's attention, it's almost a cheap trick. You can engage the reptile brain, but then it's like I want to invite you into a deeper state of existence. And a lot of
Right.
people,
Right.
I think a lot of general audiences, Americans, I can't speak for others, tend to lean towards the quick immediate satisfaction, short-term thinking versus long-term, lack of discipline, you
Yeah,
could call it.
sure. Um, we have kind of like sometimes I think like Americans, we're very good at forgetting ourselves. We don't have culturally, we don't have very long memories. We reinvent ourselves like every 20 years. Every generation tries to reinvent itself, or at least for the past 100 years, it's been that way, if not longer. And it's different in other cultures. And I didn't realize that until I had traveled some places, and I was like, oh, holy cat! This is a completely different mindset in certain parts of the world compared to here, where it's just constant reinvention, constant. Everything is new every 20 to 25 years. Every generation reinvents everything. Um, and we don't have this kind of like ingrained generational memory that goes back 500 years or
Mm.
even 1,000 years. Like in Arab world, that's totally true. They make a point of impressing upon their kids from the cradle stuff that we would go, why are you even thinking about that? That was 350 years ago. And for them, they're like, no, we have to do this. Our children must remember this stuff as if it's current, present day. It's their lives, it's their heritage. They're gonna live and think this stuff just like we lived and thought it. And that just doesn't happen in America, or at least I don't think it happens in very many places.
Mhm. It's partly the individualism. So
Yeah,
outside of my own
yeah,
experience, the world doesn't
sure,
exist. It's almost taught. I'm a public school kid, so
right.
there seems
Same.
to be this. For some reason, they decided that was important to teach kids the self-esteem, individualism, which
Sure.
can be good.
Right. If it's earned, I think that's the mistake we've made is starting in the 80s when I was an older kid. I was 15 in 1989, so I remember seeing this start to come on the beginnings of it, and it was. I mean, I kind of got it. I was like, oh yeah, they're trying to compensate for the fact that school sucks for most of us, and especially if you're a dorky, sensitive kid like I was, you'd get your shit kicked hard, and they were trying to counterbalance that with no, everyone is special and everyone has their own unique everything. But then it seems like they just took it way too far, and participation trophies and on and on and on, and nobody had to earn anything. Heck, these days they're canceling grades at Ivy League schools. I don't understand. I This seems completely off the rails. Um, Nobody has to earn anything anymore. You're just congratulations, you're perfect and amazing just the way you are. Here's your diploma.
Yeah, we're
Thank you
still
for
seeing it
attending our
unfold
Ivy League
now.
school. Say it again.
We're still seeing it unfold today, but I think it's going to keep
Yeah,
happening
yeah,
until. I mean, is the project a problem self-correcting? I'm not sure, but
sure.
when planes start falling out of the sky because the pilot hasn't had any training, the rubber's going to meet the road, I suppose.
Big time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When people
Furthermore,
die in surgery, yeah, the planes fall out of the sky.
having
Yeah, I
machines
agree.
do all the work for us, I think, is one of the great dangers. Um, like, let's say the person doesn't have real training. Part of the humility is all right. Let me rephrase that. Your black belt teacher, you learn humility as one of the core lessons only through repetition and many years of, say, if you're fighting in tournaments or something, you lose way more fights than you win at first. And that teaches you to be humble.
Sure.
There are many lessons to be learned on the, let's say, if we're climbing up the mountain of skill or expertise, mastery. There are so many lessons that if you take the shortcuts up, and I think the culture that we've been talking about praises, oh, take the shortcut. You'll
Right.
become a master quicker,
Yeah.
and then you don't even have to do the work. But then there's so many things that are lost. I'm not talking about planes falling out of the sky necessarily in the arts, but we talk about so much junk being published and so many movies being released that are junk. I'm sure there's going to be it's going to be harder to stand out in the crowd. Nonetheless, we
Yeah,
have to press
sure.
on.
I think to me that's one of the most demoralizing aspects of the new world. Like I won't lie, there was a certain kind of um, there was a certain kind of satisfaction in the old world of publishing where surviving the editorial cut in and of itself was like, haha, I made it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you knew you had done something when you finally cracked through, you got that contract, you got that check, you had survived a winnowing, and that felt good. That was a wonderful thing. These days, the winnowing is the market itself, but how to stand out in that market when, at least with prose publishing, there's now more people publishing in the English language, more books and stories than at any time in history,
Yeah.
and they are shoving them to market at this insane pace. I've talked to many indie authors. I've gotten them to tell me their yearly schedules, and it's a madhouse of push it to market, push it to market, push it to market as fast as you can, as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And how to stand out in that is such a puzzle to me because in the old days you had this your book would get published, it would get circulated in what was called advance copies, typically with reviewers and review magazines, and you might get some advance press, and then you would go to the bookstore, and there's your book in the new books section, front forward with the beautiful cover art that some wonderful artist has made for your book, and all of this was just kind of a little bit concierge, if I can use that word. Maybe that's not an exact word to use, but it was a little bit concierge. With indie, there's no concierge. It is push it as rapidly as you can, as much as you can, as loudly as you can, and everyone is doing the same thing. And uh, I'm still not over it, I guess, because I'm like, my goodness, how are even very talented people um, supposed to stand out in that? Well, especially now, like, okay, we talked about a little bit machines taking over more and more work. Elon's pushing his whole Optimus robot for physical labor, and everyone's so proud of AI and AI taking over all this stuff. And I travel a lot for the military, and I'm in hotels a lot, and I see kids wandering the halls with their phones at their lips, constantly asking these phones, "Hey Siri, what is what da da da? Hey Siri, what about this? Hey Siri, please tell me this. Hey Siri," and I have this really bad feeling that we are giving more and more to AI that we perhaps shouldn't. Cognitively, maybe even morally, right? Like, I cringe to think what some of these kids are asking Siri to tell them, especially if it's a question involving ethics or anything like that. I've already seen lots of articles talking about colleges just giving up and throwing up their hands and saying everybody's using AI to write all their papers now, and we don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
Some of the colleges are even using AI to try to figure out if the papers are written with AI, and apparently the majority of the papers are written with AI. So, uh, how to convince people that the genie they've released from the bottle isn't the great thing that they perhaps think it is? I don't know. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if it can be done. It's kind
Yeah,
of like if I don't know, pulling an example out of my head. If a kid decides I'm going to leave the house and go live a wild life, the parent can try to advise them, but if the kid won't listen, it's like, well, I can't stop you, I suppose. I'm going to just
yeah,
be sad for you.
right.
I mean, it's just a gut feeling also for me when I try to persuade people, even my peers, don't use AI, don't even consider using it.
Sure, sure.
And there's this whole laundry list of reasons. I don't even
I
know where
think
to
for
start
me,
with that.
yeah, no, from a prose standpoint, my personal opinion, and of course I have friends who disagree with me strongly on this, and we've already talked about it, but my personal opinion is that when it comes to prose, fiction, prose, and I would even say nonfiction, it pays for you to do your homework the old-fashioned way. Don't let AI into your process. And I know the arguments that people are using to argue that it's justified, or I'm not really using AI, I'm just using it to like mess with ideas. And okay, yeah, sure, but I if the people creating the AI, like, Elon Musk is building this supposed super farm in Texas, and he's doing it for AI. He wants to have the best AI on the planet. If this thing we call AI gets sophisticated enough that, say, a 15-year-old can put their phone to their mouth and say, "Hey Siri, write me a book in the style of J.R.R. Tolkien, talking about his son Eldarion or talking about Aragorn's son Eldarion after Aragorn's died, and make it 150,000 words and in the style of Tolkien, blah blah blah." And then, lo and behold, the phone creates a book for him, and it even reads it to him in whatever actors' voices he wants to. Like, if it gets that good, uh, you don't need authors anymore. Most people will just decide that, no, I can create whatever entertainment content I want. Right now, some of my other friends tell me that's impossible. That's never going to work. I hope they're right. Like, my friend Sarah Hoyt was arguing with me on Twitter about this last week. I hope like heck she's right. I hope she's right that, because again, this thing we call AI, it's not really AI. We use that as a convenient label, but it's not thinking. Nothing. There's no thought. There's no person. There's no mind behind any of this.
No spirit.
It is just sophisticated scripting. And it's her opinion that the sophisticated scripting, as applied to prose at least, cannot get even a tenth of the emotional heft, the story beats. There's all these things that you pick up in the self training of becoming an author that are not obvious at the start, and you start to become kind of semi consciously aware of them as you get better. Um, and I hope she's right that AI never figures out the trick of that, because it will force people to still be engaged in the process, to still come up with the stories. I myself, I guess some people would call me a Luddite. Again, I hope AI never gets good enough that it can tell stories on a level that any person would consider enjoyable. I kind of hope that for art too. Yeah, with visual arts, it's like, yes, I have played with Midjourney and I've played with Grok, and it's been interesting as a toy to see, okay, what can they come up with? What can they really come up with? Especially improbable, what I would call kit bashing, taking two improbable ideas and smashing them together. Like, hey, let's put David Hasselhoff, on the beach of Gilligan's Island or some dumb thing, and how well can it do it? Now, in some instances, it's been incredibly eye-opening to see how well it manages cramming these ideas together. But then again, in the back of my mind, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I like this. I really don't know if I like this, because there's something special and almost intangible about a human being, whether it's photographic or pencils or paint, or, of course, everyone uses digital now. This was the other thing I learned. Sorry, I'm going off topic a bit. I apologize.
No, no. I'm
Uh,
following.
when I was relatively new author, I used to get asked back to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future contest in Los Angeles, and it's kind of like a returning winner. Like, hey, he's a past winner, and now he's publishing and he's doing good, and he's kind of here to shepherd you new winners, blah blah. Um, and I would meet both the new illustrators and the new writers. And the thing I noticed is that not only were the new illustrators usually 10 to 12 years younger than the writers, almost guaranteed they were a decade younger at least. Sometimes it was several decades. But they were also painting all digital. They had these Apple pads that were huge, like these like broadsheet sized Apple pads, and they were using their fingers. There was no physical brushes involved at all. The program would let them draw and paint with their fingers, and they were doing this amazing, fantastic art. And I remember pausing and thinking about that and going, okay, so it's not a physical brush anymore. Does that bother me? And I was like, maybe, maybe not. But where I could give it credence is I said, okay, the medium has changed. It's not a canvas, it's a digital world. The tool has changed. You know, again, they're painting with their fingers, but at least it is a human being, a human mind creating this stuff. It is a person imposing their mental vision onto a page. Now it's a digital page, but they're imposing it onto the page. The computer is doing nothing of its own. It is only doing what it is being told to do. And now we're in this AI realm where people are like, yeah, I'm telling it what to do. I'm giving it prompts. But I'm like, yeah, sorta.
Yeah.
But the software is doing so much heavy lifting that you kind of can't really say, like, I would never any of the kooky stuff I told Grok or Midjourney to cook up for me. There's two things I would never do. I would never take that and put it out there in the world as mine. Look what I created. This is my work. And it's like, you didn't do any work. You typed in a few words and said go. That's not work. That's not, to me, that is not being creative. It might be clever. I would definitely say if you can be clever with the prompting, and you can figure out the knack of the prompting, sure, I'm not even going to call that a skill. I'm going to call it like a knack, right? You might have a little bit of a knack for doing prompting, but you're not doing the heavy lifting. The way I saw these kids, and I'm going to call them kids because most of them were, at Illustrators of the Future, where they were still having to apply their minds over many hours, in many cases, to these pieces of work. Um, there's just a there's like a light year of difference between somebody sitting down and typing in a few words to a prompt and somebody sitting at a digital slate and spending hours or even days creating an image, especially again at Illustrators of the Future, they were in real time illustrating somebody else's story. So they were doing the magic of taking somebody's described words and in a single image they have to come up with something that's going to telegraph that story to a potential audience. Somehow they have to encapsulate the emotional heft or a high point or a moment of great drama in the story, and they have to, in a single image, put that forward. And to me, that was just like AI isn't doing that. That's not what AI is doing. And I don't care how sophisticated the prompts are or how clever people are with the prompts. I don't think it's on the same level. And I'm bothered like in this very non-specific place in my creative soul about more and more creative people falling on the crutch of AI and yet insisting they're still doing creativity at the same level that they were doing it before. I don't think it's at the same level. I don't think it's the same effort. I fear that we're going to get lazy again, especially if the AI gets very sophisticated and is able to fool most people at the level of thinking, oh yeah, this is just as good. You know, that's already happening now in a lot of ways. Oh yeah, this is just as good, and I'm like, nah, it's really not. And again, I have some friends who would call me a Luddite. They say, no, 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 you're looking at it the wrong way.
I
Maybe I am. Um,
Well, my position now is that I consider it an insult when someone calls me something like that. So
sure,
I
sure,
take it to their level, at least what I think is like, okay, you're just not an artist anymore. I insult them
sure,
back
sure,
because
sure.
you're basically saying a person doing what I'm doing is redundant.
Right.
Well, now it's just bare knuckle. Like, I kind of don't acknowledge that person as a creator anymore.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it's rude. I agree. And it's see, this is interesting because we talked about ego before, right? Like the ego is in this so I've noticed this. There's so much ego now in the conversation about AI and creative product. And people get very defensive and very testy. Uh, Again, I'm kind of from the old side of it, where I think human minds doing creative work, again, prose, sculpture, canvas, pencils, whatever it happens to be, need to have full and untainted control of that process, pretty much from start to finish. Um, I was okay with the medium switching from, again, canvas to digital. I saw that with my own eyes, and I saw these kids sitting and literally painting with their fingers. And I was like, okay, that's different. And in some ways, the digital landscape did make certain things easier to do. But if the kids sat the tablet on the table and stood up and walked out of the room, the tablet did nothing.
Yeah.
It sat there, not a single line, no shading, no color, no nothing. The person had to come back and sit back down and get back to work. I think it needs to stay that way. I don't relish the idea of anybody in any artistic realm putting in a bunch of prompts, standing up and walking away from the table, and then coming back, and there's a fully fledged thing on the computer, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's mine. I created that." Because I'm like, no, you really didn't.
Well, at risk of
You
sounding too blunt, I might compare it to love with a real person versus a JPEG. You talked
sure,
about how
right, sure,
your wife and my wife too, the way that we talk to each other is like I can't control what she says. And sometimes she
right,
says things that I need to hear but don't want to hear.
sure, yeah,
Versus I'm going to program an AI bot, whatever,
right,
to, and she'll say exactly what I want her to say.
right.
That's a
A waifu,
one-sided,
right, sure,
that's one way to look at it.
right,
Another way
yeah.
I would maybe, all right, I like movies, and there's Akira Kurosawa. Have you ever heard of him?
Oh yeah, yeah. Very, very famous. Probably, maybe even the most famous Japanese director.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm a huge fan of his, and
Hmm.
me and my wife have been watching his old movies. And she's not a huge movie person, but has
Hmm.
become a huge movie person because we've seen a bunch of his flicks. And she goes, "I didn't know movies could be this good." She said something
Oh,
like that,
sure. Right.
and
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like I compare that to nowadays. There's the Marvel movies, and there's so many of them, and Disney's remaking all their live action remakes, and everyone hates them, but they can't quite articulate why. But then I
Sure.
compare that to a Kurosawa movie, and I don't even think they're in the same like they're not even the same. I don't know what the word is, but they seem the same on the outside. They have actors and music, and there's things happening on the screen, but one I would compare to like a cat toy, and the other is actual art. And to me, the difference lies in the humanity of the creator versus the boardroom style of storytelling that Disney outputs. There is this junk that comes out where it is, I'll use art as an example. It is definitely a JPEG when you tell AI to make something for you. And it certainly can communicate ideas, but it's not being filtered through a human hand, a human mind, a human spirit. The image that's being generated, I think, is just soulless. And it's the same, I would say, as programming a machine to say that it loves you and all that good stuff and makes you feel good. But it's not really alive. To me, I see plainly that it is soulless garbage, like a Marvel movie.
Sure.
And I have seen and I know what real art is. And I don't think most people care. Like a guy going to a movie with his girlfriend on a Friday night just wants to watch a movie. He doesn't really care. It's like, oh yeah, there was definitely lights and sounds and lots of noise, and yeah, it was definitely a movie. I'm like, okay, but were you moved? Were you changed? Did it really like deeply do anything to you? Do you feel the voice of the artist speaking through? I mean, I could look at paintings from 500 years ago, and I'm hearing the voice of the artist speaking to me, and it's profound. It's spiritual. I have to use spiritual
Sure.
language. I'm
Sure.
moved. But having experienced real art, I know what fake art is. It's a banana taped to a wall. It's pure
Right.
nonsense. But
Yeah,
if
sure.
you even go back to like oh, who was that artist with the mustache? Salvador Dali.
Hmm.
Back in those days, they were the heralds announcing the death of art, and a lot of people will say like, "Oh, did photography ruin painting?" No, it didn't. I'm like, actually, I kind of think it did, because in the days where photography started replacing art and motion pictures were coming along, and motion pictures and photography are art forms, people realized, oh, we don't need to commission paintings. Like a king can commission a painting of his family, but now they could just take a photograph. Oh, we don't need the court painter anymore. So painting became more common, but I think our love for the arts has eroded in the past
Sure,
century.
sure. That's an interesting. I'm wishing like heck I had my friend Travis Lee Clark. He's a PhD art historian. Used to teach down at Utah Valley University. I had lunch with him yesterday. He can talk this subject forever. He's very knowledgeable and he's very good,
Hmm.
and he has some very good opinions. Yeah. How the market, like now we're into the realm of how does the market affect the artist and vice versa, and how at the mercy of the market is the artist, and does the artist even owe the world their art if there's no support in it, meaning there's no financial gain. Like I concluded way back when that even if I never sold a word, probably I would have kept doing books and stories just because there was a tremendous satisfaction in the process. I thought what I was doing was good. It took a while for my evolving skill set to get to the point where it was entry level for the market. Um, but I never thought that somehow was like a commentary on my ability. Other than just again, there was a polishing that had to take place in terms of the skill set. But as far as like the skill set being dispensed with, I guess this is where I get nervous about AI getting sophisticated enough that people can just tell their phones to cook up a book and yeah, read me the book while I take this 2 hour drive to wherever I've got to go. And then you don't even have a writer involved at all. There's no human mind involved in that process whatsoever. And a product is being shoved forward into people's lives that they perceive as, oh, I had my phone do a book for me. Isn't that great? It was, whatever. Again, I have this unease, this creeping unease in the pit of my stomach about that possibility, and I sure as heck hope Sarah Hoyt is right that AI just can't manage it. That there's a fundamental limit to this sophisticated scripting that we call AI, that it can't do uh, the the emotional translation that is involved. And I hope that's true for visual arts too. I really hope that's true. I mean, like when I was playing with Midjourney, I was really fascinated by what it could concoct. But at the same time, as I'm looking at this stuff, I'm like, okay, this is interesting, and in some cases, kind of amusing. But it never, to me, ever had me go, oh wow, that is profound, right? Like when I've looked at art that's been made by human hands, sculpture, paintings, sketchwork, even the digital stuff I saw the kids like. I used to peer over the shoulders of these kids that illustrated the future, and I was gobsmacked by what they were doing. It was so good. It was so far beyond anything I was ever capable of. And it was the same with my daughter. My daughter, she's grown and moved out now, but she got the bug early, and so she would fill these sketchbooks over the years with her art, and I could tell she was getting better every year. I could tell more sophisticated. Her skill set was way beyond mine by the time she was a mid-aged teenager than I ever was. And I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, okay, there is an investment that is taking place here. It's an emotional investment, it's a spiritual investment, it's a mental investment. And when I look at what Midjourney is capable of, I'm like it doesn't exist. It's a product. It's like you said, yeah, it's a JPEG. It may even be a high-res JPEG. And the AI might have even gotten the trick of doing like fabrics and how fabrics fall and the different sheens of different surfaces or the matte and opaque surfaces. There's details in there that it's amazing that the AI got. And then of course the figure has seven fingers and the mouth is screwed up and there's three eyeballs or some dumb. It's funny to me still how the AI it'll nail all this other stuff and then it'll screw up something so simple. I saw one the other day where I was like, wow, that's incredible. And it had screwed up this one detail so badly. I just started laughing and I thought, okay, part of me hopes that that's how it always stays. That AI never ever achieves that final step into the world of making imagery or prose or whatever. I hope it always screws up like that because that will that will always reassure me that we have not created, in fact, the mimic of a human mind. It's just programming. It's just sophisticated scripting. It's not thinking. Um, yes, there is some self-interest here. I would love to stay in business as a creative person. I think all of us who are making money at it would. Um, but I would be reassured that the technology is not capable of matching us as human beings in this very important arena of human life, which is taking raw material, even if it's just words, and making something unique and profound and impactful and powerful out of it. And I don't think AI can do that. It may never. I hope it never does. And
I
again, I have friends who would tell me I'm full of crap and I need to jump off a bridge, but that's kind of my mindset, right? That's kind of where I'm at.
I have to speak about, like, if someone were to tell me that to my face, and I actually anticipate having such a debate in person. I'm not looking forward to it. But I have to speak with such strong terms because I feel like we're touching on what is humanity at its core.
Sure.
What makes us different from animals? What makes us different from a computer? Mimicking. You could mimic a piece of art perfectly. Let's say it does figure out the fingers and all this, goofy stuff. Nonetheless, if I know that it's AI, even if I'm tricked, it is an offense to me as a human. When I am told, all right, let's take self-driving cars, for example, I'll never use it. Um, I don't like the idea that I won't get to experience the pleasure of a drive. And they could say,
Sure.
oh, you still can. But there are so many details and growth opportunities. Let's say the other day I was hiking, a little hike around a nearby place that I like to hang out.
Hmm.
And I'm walking, and I could sometimes drive the whole circuit. But instead, I got out of my car and I got sweaty and I went amongst the trees and I explored and I learned. And there's all these things that will happen to a person while you're out walking and or manually driving and getting lost and not using a map even. There's opportunities for self-growth and reflection, and the process, I would argue, is the goal, at least for an artist or a creator. I won't just say
Sure.
artist, where
Sure.
we enter the flow state. And it doesn't happen often. Do you know about the flow state?
I've heard that phrase used in various contexts. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
For anyone
It's like the
listening,
Zen. It's the Zen state. You're in the zone.
yeah.
Yeah. I get it.
Well, they say basically when your skill level is high enough and the challenge level is high enough, if it meets at that apex, you're able to enter the
Hmm.
flow state and you lose sense of
Yeah.
like time, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Happened to me this morning.
Writers, we have that. Yeah. Yeah. We totally have that in Writerville.
Oh yeah. And actually, I would love to
It's
ask you about that. Like, do you enter it often, or when you're writing? Like, let me frame it a certain way. At least in the visual arts world, I'm listening to music. I'm comfortable. I'm not too cold, not too hot, not
mhm,
hungry,
mhm,
whatever.
mhm.
And I lose my sense of being in my body, and it's this ecstasy comes over me of like pure creativity. And I think that's almost, I would have to describe it in divine terms. It feels it must be like if we're created in the image of God, like that must be pure creativity, like the beauty of making a stroke. I'm speaking this into existence. It's like I'm imitating my creator, to speak in abstract terms, I guess. And I lose all sense of self, ego, whatever. I'm just in the act of creation, and I would possibly argue it is the happiest I could be
Sure,
for a
sure.
prolonged amount of time. And you completely bypass that when you have something do it for you. As a writer
Agreed.
now, how do you often enter the zone and just find yourself with like 10 written pages?
Yeah, sometimes I dimed myself out earlier as being bad at deadlines. Uh, but there are moments, whether I've got a deadline on my neck or not, usually late at night. For some people, it's different hours of the day. Often this will hit me when I'm in the wee hours. It's 11 o'clock, midnight, maybe 1 in the morning, and I am well past the stretching and getting the muscles loose phase. Usually there's this, at least for me, there's this probably about 30 to 45 minutes time where I'm warming up. I've sat down, I've told myself, okay, I need to reach a certain point in the story, or I need to get a certain amount of words in, or I need to, there's some designated goal that I need to achieve before I can call the session over. And the first 30 to 45 minutes is I can tell I'm cold, and I will usually start by rereading a certain amount of the prior text that I've put down in the prior session, the last few pages, to kind of get my brain back into, okay, where was I at? And also, where do I need to go? And then I start typing, and the first few paragraphs are usually pretty sludgy. It's like the oil in the engine is still cold, and it's still, man, let's keep going, let's keep going. But if I can get past that first hour roughly and get into hour two, usually by hour two I'm cooking along. One of my most surreal ones was I was actually on deployment, or technically I was in pre-deployment. So I'm trying to finish a big piece of this book. This is, just so people know, this is the book that got me the Dragon Award for Best Science Fiction Novel back in 2019. At this point, it hadn't been published yet. I'm sitting at a facility in Texas, pre-deployment. We're getting ready to go to Fort Hood. And I was like, I've got to finish this. I've got a Saturday. I don't have duty. The building's mostly cleared out. It's just me and a few other people hanging around. So I squirreled myself away at a desk where I knew I could be alone, put my headphones on. At like 6:30 in the morning, I made sure to have a proper breakfast, eat, whatever. And I just went. And I don't think I stopped, except for I did stop for 30 minutes to have a meal at lunch and then again at dinner. And I literally wrote all day. And it ended up being, I think, like 22,000 words. Now, in prose terms, that's a lot. For most people, if they can get 1,000, maybe 2,000 a day, that's pretty darn good. So I went like 10 times that in about a 14-hour, maybe even 15-hour period. Now, I would not recommend this on a regular basis to any sane person. I was trying to get this done because I thought once I hit Fort Hood, I'm not going to have time to work on this like I want to. I need to get this finished. So I was motivated. I did have a deadline. Deadlines for authors are wonderful inspiration makers because, again, your butt's against the wall. You got to get this thing done. But at the same time, that whole day in my memory is one of being almost outside my own body. Like my brain was so in the story, and the story was bleeding out through my fingers at such a pace. There's been very few times I've had it like that. That was kind of like a supreme moment of being in the zone. Uh,
Which book was this?
this was called A Star-Wheeled Sky, published in late 2018. I think it came out Christmas 2018. Hard science fiction, military science fiction book. But it hadn't been completed yet. And I was like, okay, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this off to my editor at Bain, Bain, the publisher. And I knew I had to get it done before I went to Fort Hood. So pre-mob, there was some downtime. Again, this was a Saturday. We had no duty. A lot of people had, gone home for the weekend. I was still in a mobilized status, so I couldn't go home. My home was back in Utah, and I'm sitting there in Texas. So I kind of had nothing to do. So I'm like, okay, perfect. I have nothing to do. I have a whole Saturday to myself. I have a building mostly to myself. I have a desk. I have a chair. I have a laptop. There is no reason I can't get this done, except being lazy. And I was like, nope, not gonna let that excuse get me again. Now, I am a very lazy person by nature. I don't sit down normally and go, yay, I'm gonna write today. Most of the time, it's like, that's right. I missed yesterday and I missed the day before, or I missed the week before, or whatever. Usually, I'm feeling kind of guilty because I've neglected the thing. So I will make myself sit down and do it. And the first hour is like kind of ouch. But by the second hour, and especially if I can go second, third, or even fourth hour, I know what you mean. I know how that feels. It's, again, kind of like existing outside, sort of like existing outside my body a little bit. I could lose complete track of time. That's happened to me many times. Where, again, I will start at maybe 8 or 9 at night. Like all my duties for the day are done, put my kid to bed, whatever. And my wife is like, okay, you got to go right. Yep, I got to go right. I'll see you later. Go into my basement office, sit down at the keyboard. And next thing I know, it's 4:30 in the morning and I've done 5,000 words. That's a remarkable thing. And I agree with you completely. I agree entirely that when somebody thinks they can shortcut that, when they think they can prompt their way through that and in a few seconds get the equivalent. I don't think it's equivalent, not in fine detail. And two, I think they're cheating themselves. I agree with you. They're as a creative person, they are canceling out one of the great intangibles of being a creative, which is to find that God space where you are intersecting your talent at whatever level you've developed it with your imagination, and there's just this lightning synergy that takes place in that special moment. And if you skip all that and you just, think, okay, I'm going to get clever at doing prompts and the AI is going to do the rest of the work. I complained at the beginning about audience capture. I fear that if the AI gets sophisticated enough, the audience capture will claim most indie authors. They will see the advantage, the economic advantage. It'll be a raw. Uh, what's the phrase I'm looking for? It'll be a complete cost analysis thing where they go, oh, I can generate X amount of prose in way less time using an AI, and I don't have to work my brain nearly as hard, and I can still push it to market, and it'll sell just like my other stuff sold. Why not? And that will be the end of it. That will be the end of it for most of them because they will already see that I have to produce as much product as I possibly can, and AI will just make that simpler and less work for the same amount or more, and that's the way it will go. And you know, if the AI is sophisticated enough to pull it off, then I'm going to the audience level, and I'm hoping that again Sarah Hoyt is right, and she goes, the audience will be able to tell. I hope she's right. I hope the audience sees this and goes, yeah, this just isn't working for me the way real books work for me. And that the market finally is the final decider of whether or not we're going to accept this as a paying vocation.
It,
I really hope it's not true. I hope it's not true. I really don't want it to be.
well,
But
whatever happens, there are people like ourselves who value and can recognize the difference, even if superficially you can't tell at first.
sure.
There is a magic in the details. When I read a book, I'm thinking about the author and my relationship to them. They are telling me a story, but they're also revealing their heart to me.
Sure.
There's all these little details. And when I read a good book, like right now, for anyone listening, I'm reading The Chaplain's War. And when I receive enjoyment from a book, I want to thank the author. I feel like I know them a little better having read it.
And you do. And you do. You
Yeah.
absolutely do.
And
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
talk to that author. So now I have the pleasure of talking to the author, and I want to talk to you more after I finish the book. And I want to read
Okay.
Star Wheeled Sky as well.
Oh,
Hopefully, maybe
good.
even in person if I can visit. But we could talk about that off air.
Sure.
I want to thank the author for the fun and also for showing me parts of their soul and helping me deepen my own spirit by exposing me to experiences that I've never had. For instance, I've talked about this before, way back in the day. Storytelling is one of the oldest things that humans have ever done. And
Right.
cavemen around a fire. It's like, I'm going to tell you about this creature I saw. You did not see it, but it's this giant hairy thing. And let's say I'm describing a bear to you or a lion. You can benefit from my experience even though you have not encountered one. And if the moral of my story is, yo, watch out, if you see a thing that I'm going to describe to you, just run away because it'll kill you. Humanity can benefit from telling stories to each other in the same way that, like, let's use idol worship, the book of Exodus. They go up to the mountain, they're in the wilderness, and Moses is going up, and the people were so impatient to have a god, they built one for themselves. And in many stories in the Old Testament, it's like, oh, you want to have a fake god? Well, go ahead and have it. And it ends up destroying them. Oh, you want to have a king? Well, here's a king. Oh, he's horrible. And you end up destroying yourselves. And I keep seeing this habit of humanity of wanting the quick, easy solution. And in this case, in our generation, it's AI. I'm never going to get off this hill. Where, oh, don't you want to have a book? Think of how many books you can make, how fast you can make, think of how much
Yeah.
money you can make. But
Right.
for me, it's the spiritual. You cannot see the spiritual world by its nature. You
Yeah.
cannot see God, but he's everywhere. And I think it's just you have to put on the glasses of I'm looking for the spiritual. And I don't think the common person has the patience. I'm not being pessimistic necessarily, but I think just you have to speak the truth. You have to be artistic and creative. A creator who's really a creator will need to do this. Just it's in our DNA or whatever
Sure.
it is.
Sure.
I'm going to create because of the passion I have, and it's just something I have to do. And whether or not someone sees it or pays me, I would love to be paid. And it's sad if a great artist is not paid. Like I think about Van Gogh all the time. How
Right.
no one ever bought a painting of his. He sold one painting in
Yeah.
his lifetime,
Right.
but
Yeah.
he still
Tragic,
painted.
tragic story. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most well-known painters in the Western canon, and yeah, the guy was broke. Yeah.
He was broken. The poor guy like had mental issues, and there was a million
Yeah.
reasons. But I would argue it's because of all those things that happened to him. He became famous after, unfortunately, he passed away. X'd himself out.
Right.
And then it was that story that moved people and made them value his work. Now, I don't want that to happen to living artists. I want them to be able to create, have long lives, a huge library of work, because it's a shame when someone goes unrecognized and can't make more work, meaningful
Sure.
work. That's
Sure.
the tragedy to me, but it is what it is. I can't even I just say it's a shame. Is it a sin? I don't know, but it's too bad. When people praise Marvel movies and nobody watches, none of the common people watch, Akira Kurosawa. And I tongue in cheek say common people. But when they do, it's like, wow, this is what a movie can be. Casablanca, old black and white movies, or Night of the Hunter. You ever seen that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh my goodness.
My wife and I, late last year, embarked upon an interesting project. This ties into what you just said, where we decided, we're empty nesters. What do you do when you're empty nesters? So we started having movie nights, but not just any movie nights. We decided to go back to the beginning of the Academy Awards, the Motion Picture Academy Awards, and watch not only the Best Picture winners, but also the nominees from each year. So we went back and started with The Silence, and we're just slowly working our way toward modern era. Now, we're not doing this very rapidly. It's maybe one or two movies a week, if we remember and we have time. But it is already fascinating to see how different the movies were. Now, granted, there's a lot of quality issues. The acting, there's a lot about some of the old movies where you're just like, oh, wow, that was really terrible. At least by modern standards of pacing and acting and what you expect. But at the same time, some of them have been really, really good. I can definitely see one of our most recent we watched because we got to the end of the 1929-1930 list, and the winner for that was All Quiet on the Western Front, which was based on the best-selling book. And I can see why it hit for its time. Now, is it up to par with a film like 1917, which is much more recent, but also focuses on the First World War? Like, I thought 1917... Sam Mendes, I think, if I remember correctly, had also done American Beauty, and I loathed American Beauty, not because it wasn't well done. American Beauty is a fantastically well done, fantastically acted movie, and I loathe it with a passion because I hated the message in the movie, and I hated the characters. I thought it was completely nihilistic. Utterly, I wanted to just, I hated everybody in that movie.
I feel that way about Cormac McCarthy.
Did you see The Road?
I
What did you
did.
think
I
of The
hated
Road?
it, but it was good.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay,
Or what's the
exactly.
one
So,
with the judge? Oh, brother.
oh,
Everyone was talking about it last year.
I can't remember. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
go on.
So, uh, the style back then was different. They gave themselves, like you talk about Marvel movies, they gave themselves time to tell a story back then, at least in motion picture form, that we don't do now. Everything, seemingly, that's modern Hollywood is like there are no, but my perception anyway, is there are no quiet moments where you just take in the scenery. Like in Lawrence of Arabia, a lot of that movie is not even necessarily what the actors are doing and what they're saying. Lawrence of Arabia transports you to this otherworldly place
Yeah.
that most Americans have never seen and would never see unless they went to the Middle East. I saw a little bit of it, but I never saw any of the nice stuff. Uh, and they let themselves do it. They let themselves take advantage of the widescreen format with the panoramas and the beautiful. And you could see the genesis of that in these old black and white films where they started to do that. The movie wasn't terribly good, but it was a Western. I can't remember the name of which Western it was, but it was an early Western. It was an early talkie. But you could see where they were starting to figure that out. They're like, oh, you know what? Let's let the camera slowly sweep across this southwestern vista. You know, there's buttes and cacti, and yes, it's black and white and it's kind of grainy, but it's still, you could see they were starting to figure that out with the medium. They were realizing, wow, what can we do with this medium? And I want to say that the modern MCU people, they've got green screen syndrome, and they've got pacing issues where they're trying to cram things at you so quickly in terms of pacing, and everything is a visual frenzy of CGI. Like I hate to admit it, the last two or three MCU movies I watched, I didn't really enjoy that much at all. They were action packed and they were just crammed full of amazing CGI that we could have never thought of doing 30 or 40 years ago at the very beginning of when computers were starting to be put into film. Um, and it was boring, right? I was just like, okay, this is, and I would turn to my wife and say, how did you feel about that? And she's like, whatever, Merp.
Yeah, I won't
And I'm
even
like,
watch it.
wow. Yeah, oh yeah, sure. A lot of people just get turned off and don't even bother. I hate to say it, I've become very crusty about movies. There's very little that even gets me excited to want to go to a theater anymore, right? Like,
But I would argue
um,
the old movies are better. Like,
I
we
I
were
think on a
talking.
certain level, sure. Go ahead.
Well, all right,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
say there's all these stunts and action in the MCU movies, whatever. We're seeing a guy with wings fight a fighter jet. I don't know what is stupid.
Hmm.
I'm not excited by that at all. But when I go back and watch an old Jackie Chan movie, and all those stuntmen are really doing what they're
Right.
doing,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
getting hurt, or they could get hurt, or an old Buster Keaton movie where he could get
Sure.
killed, and
Yeah.
it's
Sure.
like, oh my god, like that's real tension. I'm feeling it.
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
something visceral. I see it really happening. They really did it. And
Yeah.
there's something very much lost in the quote modern. And I don't think modern equals better. That's why I go back to
Right.
older movies.
Sure.
There
No, I
was,
agree with you.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, we just saw All Quiet on the Western Front. I kept marveling at that because there's some big pieces in the movie that are battle pieces and training pieces, where you had to have dozens and dozens of uniformed guys running across basically a simulated, hellscape. It's World War One. It's the trench warfare, and there's real explosions going off. And I mean, this is practical effects. So they have to fountain dirt tens and tens of feet in the air, and there's debris flying all over. That was real. Those guys were running past, wired explosives in the dirt, blowing off at certain times. And I can remember one of the earlier films we watched. It was a silent, and it was about World War One. And in reading about how they made this movie, you found out that some of the extras had died during the process of making this movie because the practical effects were so dangerous, and it involved flying too. So that they'd had some airplanes crash and guys had died. Like, this is inconceivable to modern movie making. And I'm not saying that people have to die for a movie to be like, wow, that was a movie. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, at least for me anyway, seeing that old footage and then thinking about what went into making it. Again, the green screen thing, they just can't conceive of putting in that kind of effort, much less making that kind of sacrifice, right? Like,
We could just call it the
just
human touch.
sure, sure,
I'm
right,
not saying all practical effects are, valuable, but when green screen became the norm, there's a disconnect for me. But I,
sure,
being a sensitive person to the arts, I'm always looking for, is this really happening in camera? Are these actors
yeah,
projecting?
yeah,
When
sure,
an actor is acting, like, are they pulling from real life experiences? Like, I always think of this is silly, but like there's a scene in First Blood where Stallone is giving his famous speech at the end,
hmm hmm
and man, is that a powerful speech. But
I agree, yeah,
he's pulling
yeah,
from something in his
sure,
inside, and I believe what he's saying. I've seen that movie 100 times, and it's still
sure,
powerful
sure,
every time. But acting versus I'm just reading the lines, there is a
right,
world of difference.
yeah, 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 yeah.
When I think,
Um,
go on.
no, no, I go ahead. I'm totally understanding what you're saying. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah.
For anyone listening, yeah, so we agree with each other. Okay, but like
If you
when
came here to listen to George and I argue with each other, you're sorely disappointed.
well, I don't. I mean, this discussion will just have to keep going with like. I'm sure I'll get into debates. I've gotten in debates before, and it was rude and whatever. But what
Sure.
I'm most concerned with is I want more people in our generation and the generations to come to engage with art more passionately, more seriously. Like I
Hmm.
remember the title of that book we were saying, Cormac McCarthy. It was called Blood Meridian.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah.
I will acknowledge that it is an excellent book. captivating, and I hate it with a passion. But
Sure.
I think that is what art should be, is that we wrestle with it. It shows us
Sure.
things that we don't want to see.
Sure.
But if I go to a museum and I say I hate this painting, and then I start talking about why, I'm now wrestling with the art. I'm
Sure.
engaged with it. I, there's a back and forth between me and the author. There's something human happening.
Right.
I think that's what art, at least part of it, is.
Sure. And to me, I don't know how you feel about this. To me, this is, and again, this is where I wish maybe this is something we can do in the future. I would love to get, his name's Travis Lee Clark. Again, PhD, art history professor. He has many profound opinions on this very topic.
Yeah.
But to me, that's what's missing in the cynicism of modern art. You talked about the banana taped to the wall. Like, that has become that particular piece. I guess I can call it a piece. Has become emblematic of how absurd modern art is, because all it's trying to do is provoke at the cheapest, dumbest level, where it's like you're either mindlessly rejecting it, which sometimes I look at stuff like that, I'm like, what is that? How much did they pay that idiot to tape a banana to a wall, right? Or you sometimes see these performance pieces where the person will poke a bunch of holes in some 5-gallon buckets, and he'll put red paint in one and green paint in the other, and he'll just twirl in a circle and make a mess on a white floor, and then all these people standing off to the side applaud and cheer like he's done something amazing. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, I guess it's art, sort of, but it's of a finger painting level, childish. Like, I'm not gonna. Maybe this makes me snobby, but I'm not gonna pay money to see something like that, right? Like, I'm not going to pay money like my wife and I paid money to go see a Van Gogh exhibit. We talked about Van Gogh. We saw an exhibit that came to Salt Lake a couple years ago. And to me, that was worthwhile to go see. Again, one of the greatest names in the Western canon. The impressionistic style. I've always loved Starry Night. Starry Night's probably my favorite Van Gogh. It is for many people. But to sit and stare at Starry Night, like, or some of his, impressionistics. There's the one, people walking in the rain. This kind of stuff to me is a much more. There's a much more profound moment in looking at it and feeling it, as opposed to a guy spinning in a circle with red paint and green paint in a. Do you know what I mean? Am I making any
Oh
sense?
yeah. I see
Does this
that
make any sense?
stuff.
Okay.
No, it does. It really does. I see that stuff as a warning, because in the hierarchy, I think of the arts. They say art, no, culture is downstream from art, something like that, or politics is downstream from culture,
Oh yeah.
and therefore art is part of culture.
Sure.
And upstream from that is philosophy. And I think there was that age of the quote death of God movement, Nietzsche and all those
Oh yeah.
guys, and then modern art followed. I think when we see garbage art like Pollock and all that stuff, and before him was Warhol. Incidentally, Warhol was like a serious artist, and Picasso and all those guys. They were announcing that art was dying, and maybe even society, their society was dying, partially because we now no longer believe in God. We are part of the what do you call it? Not the Enlightenment. What did they call it? Anyway, the modern times of, oh, we don't need gods anymore, we are our own gods. And now the next generation is, we are going to build our own god, and that's what AI is going to be.
Yeah,
and
sure, right.
and it's just something I feel when I look at art, and where I see art going, when I see people saying we don't value art, we're going to make our own using this machine. I say, okay, I can't control where humanity is going, but I see where you're going, and I'm not following you.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just I feel when you look at the arts, there is like maybe a 20 to 50 year period, and obviously we're in an accelerationist age, it might be faster, where there's just more and more chaos and collapse and confusion, because we have lost our compass, our North Star. Our compasses no longer point north, or at least in secular society. We don't accept that there is this thing called God or this person. And it does not, our compass doesn't point to that north anymore. We don't look at our compass anymore. And so now we're going to create our own north, and everyone has their own north. And that's why you see
Right.
men getting pregnant, or they try to argue that. And if you
Yeah.
disagree with their North Star, you're an enemy of what they're trying to say is like, this is the
Right.
new, we're creating our own laws now, our own
Sure.
Ten
You're oppressing
Commandments.
me. You're oppressive. Right.
Sure. So
Sure.
they get as
Yeah.
mad as if you told someone that I don't believe in your God and you're also a heretic, and we're so morally opposed that we may as well fight to the death. They get so mad because you're ripping their God or digging at their God in their heart.
Right.
And
Right.
I confess that I love art so much, maybe too much, that I get that mad when someone says AI can make art. I'm like, wait a second. I've put my whole life into this
Hmm.
vocation, profession, hobby, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it because it is so close to truth to me. So I admit I get mad for maybe unnecessarily mad, but I really wish more people understood or were interested at least in what real art is.
Right.
We
No,
mentioned,
I hear you. I hear you. I totally get it. Man, I'm of two minds because what I ran into in the weird little world of science fiction very early on was there was a lot of taste making taking place. Now, this is not original to my era. This goes all the way back over a century. But it basically came down to who gets to decide what is art and what isn't, and who gets to decide, at least in the prose world of science fiction, again, this weird little niche of literature, who gets to decide what's worthy and what's not, right? I guess that's the word I always put on it, is who gets to decide what's worthy and what's not. I threw myself into the teeth of that battle on a political level about 10 years ago. I won't go into the details. It's not worth dragging that horse out of the barn for this particular discussion. Um, and I guess I came away from it thinking two things. Many of the people in the 21st century who are invested in being the deciders of what is or is not worthy are themselves what I would describe as morally debased people. And they're very fad prone and they chase, I don't know why, they chase material that, in my opinion, is demoralizing and non uplifting. Like, I guess I'm enough of a goody two shoes that I think if someone's going to take the time to invest in writing a piece of fiction, uh, it needs to have some kind of uplifting component to it. In fact, I would dare say that one of my personal rules is it has to have a morally or a spiritually, it has to, you have to, you've got to give the reader some satisfaction and make it worthwhile for them. Even if you're writing a cautionary tale, one of the series I bounced off of completely was Breaking Bad. Very, very well known. Everyone loved Breaking Bad. They loved Bryan Cranston. I get it. He did an amazing job as Walter White. I bounced off that series so damn hard because I couldn't find anything or anyone in it that was redeeming. Now, its fans have come back to me after and they're like, dude, you missed the point. It's a tragedy. It's like a operatic tragedy of seeing this man's descent. And I'm like, okay, I get it. All right. You watched it far enough that you figured out that was the point, or at least that was the point you took from it. And I get you can do tragedy. But what I was seeing in science fiction, or at least what I perceived starting around 1999, around the year 2000, was this increasingly banal focus on pet issues of identity and pet issues of politics, such that the stories, at least when I would sit to read them, yeah, it's got a spaceship on the cover. Yeah, it's branded as, I'm going to get some kind of spaceship story or something that's like classically science fiction as I might define it. And then I would read the thing and I would go, this kind of sucked. I complained on Twitter about this, about an anthology a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago, in that I thought it was very, very dishonest in how it was branded because nothing in it was what it said it was. And this was happening often enough in my little particular subgenre that it was really irritating me and kind of pissing me off because I was like, okay, this is not what this genre should be doing. And this will sound egotistical, but I thought, okay, if you identify a problem and it seems like nobody is seeing it, or at least nobody's working to remedy it, what do you do? Well, then you are left to try to fix it yourself, or at least step into the arena, to use Teddy Roosevelt's phrasing. Mm-hmm. You got to step into the arena and you got to be your own mover. You've got to be your own person who's active in the creative art that you are upset about and try to create what you think is worthwhile, or at least create the kind of art that you want to see that you're not seeing. So that was a huge motivator for me between about 2000 and 2010 when I was finally publishing. And it was kind of what helped push me over the edge in terms of getting my final practice years done before I could, crack in and actually be selling professionally. Because I was getting mad. I found myself getting more and more irritated. I'm like, this is not the genre I grew up with in the 80s and 90s. This is becoming something else, and I'm not liking it. And I'm not liking, again, the way things were becoming what I perceive to be very self-indulgent, very identitarian. The politics of it, it was like all one thing put together. And it was greatly irritating me for what I thought science fiction should be doing. And some people will accuse me of being very Pollyanna and very goody two shoes with that attitude. Very, judgmental. Probably I'd be accused of being judgmental. But at the same time, I thought, you know what? You guys can all go to hell because you, the taste makers, are yourselves trying to. It's like iconoclasm, right? You're trying to rip down the statues of what the old world was and tape your banana to the wall and say, this is just as good or better than what was there before. And you're looking at this empty plinth and going, there was a Michelangelo on that plinth, and now you've got a banana taped to the wall? What the hell are you people thinking? That was kind of the level of my ire in like 2006, 2007. Yeah. And I remember having discussions at writers' workshops with people, and I would kind of go off on these rips about how offended I was. And I know it sounds very, again, egotistical to say it this way, but that's really how I felt, because I felt like the genre was doing a disservice to the reader, like a moral disservice. Again, it was a branding disservice, because what was being sold was not what was in, the packaging didn't match the contents, so to speak. I mean, I could go on and on about how that irritated me and prompted me and motivated me to finally push through and start publishing myself in the old world, the trad pub world. And it was also part of what made it gratifying when I started picking up awards and getting some recognition, because I thought, okay, clearly I've hit a nerve somewhere. There are other people besides me who are feeling the same way. And when I started going to some of these events and talking to people, I found out, yes, there was a subculture or a counterculture in science fiction who were like, yeah, the modern stuff is a disservice to the old way. You're right to be irritated. We're irritated too. Keep doing what you're doing, kid. You're doing good. So that was very gratifying to get that from some of the oldsters, both fans and authors and editors. Because I thought, aha, I don't feel like I'm alone in the wilderness anymore. I'm seeing and perceiving the same degradation of my art. And yes, people will accuse me of being hooty-tooty to say it like that, but fine. I'm seeing the degradation of my art, and it's pissed me off enough that I'm like, no, I'm not going to let you guys get away with this.
Well, it's one could say it's the duty of a real artist to, or an obligation to just, this is how I feel. I'm going to put my
Sure.
mark on the wall. Whether or
Yes.
not
Yes.
anyone understands it, maybe
Sure.
a future generation will understand, or maybe nobody will. But I
Sure.
was here,
Sure.
and this is my mark that I'm going to leave.
Right. Sure.
I wish that it wasn't like Van Gogh is the most extreme example I can think of. And then you've got really popular people who speak to the lizard brain of the masses and tickles them. And they get all the praise and all the money. But I don't see myself as one of those people. I don't care for the praise. I would love money. But I still have an obligation based on what you were describing. Like, this is
Right.
how I feel about the world, and I'm just going to leave this picture here or this story here.
Sure. Sure.
Whether you guys consume it or not, it has to exist either way. I would love for people to consume it and communicate with me so that I feel less lonely. Maybe that's a selfish desire. But I still feel the need to make it. And it sounds like you were motivated by that same thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yep, I think so. There was. I mean, it started out as when I was a young teenager as fan fiction, just dabbling in the beginnings of telling stories, but borrowing other people's worlds and other people's characters. I think a lot of authors in my generation. I'm solidly Gen X. I was born in '74. I think a lot of us that's kind of how you come to it, sort of. And there's no thought beyond just playing and enjoying the play. I didn't start really taking it seriously until I mentioned at the beginning I'd done public radio. So the whole reason I was involved in that in the first place is because on Sunday nights here in Salt Lake City on KRCL, there was a gentleman named Scott Howard who had for years done an electronic music program for like 2.5 hours every Sunday night that I'd really enjoyed. And so I'd tuned into that for years. Then he started doing something I thought was really interesting. He had a great radio voice. He still does. But he started doing this kind of little homemade science fiction serial in the style of the old days of radio serials. And he and some of his friends would get together and they would do these little half-hour episodes, and there were characters and there were sound effects and there was music, and it was really rather charming, and I was really kind of enchanted with this thing. So that by the end of '92, uh, I was like, wow, this is really, really great. Now, I could tell that they were running out of scripts. They had all the components, but they didn't have somebody who could do scripts. And me being perhaps naive, I thought, you know what? I could try this. I've been doing these little fanfic stories forever. I could try to actually up my game and do something a little more serious. So I contacted him. And he said, okay, show me what you got. So I sent him some of the fanfic. And he wrote me back and he said, actually, this is pretty darn good. Okay, let's see. What would you write for my little show if you're going to write for it? So I scripted some episodes for him. And they went on the air, which was a huge kick in the pants for me. I was like, wow, this is pretty remarkable. This is amazing and very, very gratifying. And then I started to get it into my head that, wow, maybe I could actually do this for real. Now, when I say for real, I mean like paid prose printed in a book like you would find in the airport, because that was my standard at the time. And I was reading bestsellers like Larry Niven and a lot of techno thrillers, Tom Clancy, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, how much more work would I have to invest in it to get to the level where I could actually sell this for print? The answer to that was a lot more work. It definitely wasn't a straight shot from little community radio show scripting unpaid to, paid novelist. It took years and years, again, of rejection letters, many, many rejection letters, short fiction, novels, blah, blah. They call it the 10,000 hour rule.
I've heard that used many times by different people to describe, especially for musicians, like supposedly the average from somebody starting learning an instrument to getting to where they're like pro quality on that instrument, where they're
Yeah.
really proficient on the instrument. It's like 10,000 hours.
Hmm.
I think that's accurate for writers. We call it the first million words rule. Your first million words is crap. Certainly mine were. I think before I finally sold something, it was about 850,000 words. And it was all just uh, gradually pushing through all these uh, invisible barriers of skill, learning story beats, learning, and none of it, at least for me, none of it was deliberate. None of it was, I'm going to set out to defeat this skill barrier this year. None of it was like that at all. It was mostly intuitive and a lot of stumbling around. And yeah, there were a lot of dead zones in there. There was a lot of, I can remember in 2005 in particular, wife and I are living in Tacoma, Washington at that point. Our daughter's like 2 or 3 years old. I'm working. I'm military on the weekends. Blah, blah. Life is very busy. But my wife pulled me aside and she was like, "I can tell you're not like really happy right now." She's like, "You're kind of depressed and you're kind of mopey and what's going on?" So long and the short of that conversation was, is she was like, "You're not writing. I can tell you're not writing. Your mood reflects it. You're not doing this creative thing that you've dedicated over a decade of your life to try to do." And her point was, she was like, you either need to do this and stay at it, or you need to find something else to replace it that you can do with equivalent passion. So I had to think about that really hard because, again, I had all these rejections and it really felt like I was going nowhere. I was very demoralized. But then I thought, no, I don't think I can quit this. I think if I quit this, I would constantly hate myself for it and then just invent excuses for myself to come back to it anyway. So I redoubled my effort. I did change a few things deliberately to just try to do some different things with how I was writing. Specifically, excuse me. Specifically, I had always written in what they call third person kind of detached perspective, which is very typical for American novels, especially where you're describing the actions and the thoughts of the people from kind of this exterior viewpoint. You're not doing it from first person as if you are the person living it. I had never done first person before, but I had read enough short fiction, at least in science fiction, to know that a lot of people were doing it. And I was like, I wonder if I should try that. I wonder if I can get the knack of that. So I started making myself do it. It was highly uncomfortable, but it paid off because within about 2 years, doing that mode for short fiction in particular, it just took me to another level. And again, this was out. I didn't set out to do this deliberately. I was just trying something different with the craft to see if it would help, and it really did help a lot. Uh, so much so that to go from first person for short fiction back to kind of a third person detached perspective for multi character, multi plot line novel writing is very difficult for me because I got so good at doing the first person that having to switch modes and go to the other one, it's like different toolboxes. It's like different tool sets. It's
Yeah.
not the same thing. I don't know if is that how it is for you. Like if you have to do multi-panel, multi-page, like the stuff you did with Razor Fist versus like Goofberry versus your one-off four-panel comics. Like how does that work for you? I'm really curious how that works for you.
The parallel I might draw for you, based on what you were saying, first versus third person perspective, might even be similar to if I was writing someone else's script versus, or if I was drawing someone's script versus if I generated the script myself and then drew it. If I'm, if the story is originating with me as the writer, then I know exactly what I want the panels to look like. I know what the characters look like, their facial expressions, all that stuff. If someone hands me a script, I need to interpret what they think or what is on the page. And if there's something not clear, I have to ask them about it. That might be something similar to first versus third person illustration. But I'm a very selfish illustrator, and I want to think that my vision comes from the script, and then it is filtered through my own experiences and tastes. So I can see why an illustrator might have a preference for writing their own scripts versus someone else's. But also I have written, terribly some, if my script is written in stage direction versus first person, I love the idea of doing first person because I can put myself in the minds of characters way more easily than if I was. I mean, when you're writing third person, omniscient narrator, or whatever, or even any kind of narrator, it's so different stylistically. You're having a conversation. Like one of the earliest books I really like when I went crazy with reading was like Interview with the Vampire. Whole book's written in first person as a conversation. And I found that style to be so interesting because there's never a moment where we're not talking to the main character. And he might even be lying to us, which we would learn later in the series, whatever. To answer the question, illustration, I don't know if there's a parallel, but having written terribly myself, I totally understand. Like there's a massive difference between I don't know if style's the right word, just who is telling me the story. So when terrible example, and I don't want to waste any more of your time. I realize we've been going for 2 hours. I had this little sci-fi story that I was writing as a comic originally. And then I realized I have to turn this into a book because I'll never live long enough to finish it. And I started writing it in third person. And I'm like, this is just so... because the comic was so subjective through the main character's eyes, I said, well, what if I try writing it through her eyes? And then I said, no, that doesn't sound right because she is not an eloquent character. She's kind of a doofus. So I had to create another character who would tell the story of watching her adventure. But I struggled writing it in third person. But then when I created this narrator, I was able to speak through him. And then suddenly the story was flowing naturally. Maybe it's a preference thing. Obviously, I like Lord of the Rings. But even then, Tolkien in The Hobbit says words like I and me. He refers to himself, the narrator. He's writing as himself. So whatever trick we have to employ as a creator, whatever makes the story feel good to read and to write, obviously we want to leave the audience with a feeling of, wow, that was fun, or that was worth my time.
That is so important. I remember that's one of Larry Niven's laws. I've talked about Larry before. He's kind of an idol of mine. Getting to work in his universe was a supreme joy. It was one of the great joys that I had. Anyway, one of his rules was it is a sin to waste the reader's time. And that stuck with me all the way back from when I was 18 years old because I thought, wow, that really is kind of true. A reader is investing money and time to partake of your thing you have created. You owe it to that person to try to give them a worthwhile experience. Now, you won't always, because tastes are different, expectations are different. Not every single reader who comes to your work is going to be like, wow, this was really great. I appreciate it. Some of them are going to go, whatever. I put it down. I've never taken it personally when somebody does that, but I still thank them. Like if they have, if they can actually come talk to me at a convention or whatever. And I've had that happen. They've said, I tried your book and I got about halfway through and it just didn't do anything for me. I've always said, thank you so much for giving me a try anyway. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry it didn't work for you. That's totally cool. I appreciate you coming and telling me anyway, because they've still made the investment. And when somebody makes that investment, like I feel like as a creative, this is where I don't like contempt for the audience. Many, not most, but many authors, I think sometimes indulge in this very egotistical concept of, you know what, the audience are just a bunch of idiots and rubes and who cares what they think. I'm the great artiste with an E on the end. I'm going to create and you unwashed people can do whatever. I don't take that attitude, me personally, because I feel like, no, that's unfair. And that's not certainly how I ever saw myself as a reader, because all authors are readers before they become authors. I was never, you know, I considered myself I'm not even going to say consumer. I considered myself a partner in this two-way transaction. You described earlier how you can read the words of someone who's centuries dead, and suddenly there they are, their perspective, their point of view, their moral paradigm. It's all there, and it's resurrected for you in that moment as the person reading that. And you are an active partner in that. And so I've always felt like, as an author, I need to respect that. I need to respect that my reader is making an investment of time, money, and there's an emotional investment there. I want to try as best as I can to give them a worthwhile experience. And I don't want to ever take for granted that they have made that investment, because that is so important. Giving them something that is worthy. I keep coming back to that word. It's got to be worthy. It's Odin whispering to the hammer, "Be worthy for the power of Thor." I kind of feel like that is the job. That you gotta create something worthy that is worth the person's investment. Anyway, that's my sermon.
I think that's a really good note to put a bookmark here.
Sure.
I mean, when you talked about visiting Van Gogh's paintings, or any painting, if you go to a museum, you can stand in front of the palette. What's wrong with me? The canvas. And you can stand where he probably stood or sat. And it's almost like you can feel his ghost in that exact place in front of the canvas.
He is alive in that moment, right?
Yeah, and there is, like you said, a two-way street. There's a communication. Sure. It's something so profound. I'm connecting. Just the fact that you're talking to another human being is profound. Like you're accessing another consciousness like yours, but it's not you. And you can do that across space and time as well. And I think that's so profound. And then to even take it further, what if there is a God out there who has also reached across space and time and said, I want you to get to know me. And for instance, here's this book.
Sure.
And it's, to me, the implications are so fascinating. People from 5,000 years ago have written something that I can read and I get to know them.
Right.
So that's another dimension of what art is. And in our own silly way, here we are talking, we leave this little podcast behind, whatever, whoever's listening, it's like they're part of the conversation too.
Yeah.
I think that's the beginning of what art appreciation can be, this depth.
Sure.
I hate to cut us off. It's so interesting. I guess if you want to leave everyone with some words or anything, please feel free, I would say. But I would love to continue this conversation.
Yeah, we should. We really should. I would enjoy that. Thank you for listening to us, everybody. I hope it's been a worthwhile 2 hours of your time. I, of course, would highly recommend you go to gprime85 on Twitter and see George's work. Gooseberry Pie, he's working on right now, a sequel to the first book. Beautiful children's book.
You're killing me.
For me, you had said you didn't want to, we talked about pride earlier, right? So I figure it's okay for me to talk about how much I admire the work you do. But yes, my books are on Amazon. You can go find me there. George has mentioned two of them. A Star-Wheeled Sky is a hard science fiction, meaning it tries to play by the rules of science as much as possible, but hard science fiction military epic. I'm working on getting the second and third parts out now. It's available through Baen Books, both in audio and in Kindle, as well as print. He also mentioned The Chaplain's War. The Chaplain's War is another book through Baen that's available on Amazon. Also Audible and Kindle. That one, just so people are aware, was an award winner and award nominee. That the genesis of it was printed, two specific chunks of it were printed in Analog Magazine. It got a lot of great attention, and then I took those two joined stories and I made them much larger and turned them into the book. I'm also going to be re-releasing a bunch of short fiction in a forthcoming anthology that's going to be out in the next probably 2, 3 weeks. This is going to be my 15-year anthology, so it's got 15 stories, some of my best work. Half of it's been released in previous treasuries. The other half of it is stories that have never been collected anywhere before, called Footprints in the Firmament. I'm going to spam that all over social media once it's available. It'll be available in print and also in Kindle. And I'll probably be signing copies of that at the Writer Cantina in Salt Lake City, Utah, coming up in July. So if you are going to be attending that, I can sign copies there. Thanks.
And hey, that's all for now. If you've listened this far, Brett and I thank you kindly for sticking around. If you enjoyed this conversation, would like to hear more like it, let me know who you'd like me to speak with in the future. Comment, whatever. Until then, links to mine and Brad's social media will be in the description if you're listening on YouTube. Hopefully it won't be another 5 years until the next episode. Though if that's the case, I wonder if my voice will get even more raspy and I'll sound like an old woman who's yelling at kids to stop using that darn AI slop and go do some real writing and drawing. So you go do it and I'll go do it and we'll catch up next time.